Hi, this is Rachel Cook with Women, Wisdom, and Wellness, and today my guest is Deanne Drda. And Deanne, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and what you do, I guess.
Okay, I am a religious science practitioner, science of mind practitioner, master's in spiritual psychology, and recently certification in emotionally focused therapy for couples, for relationships. And I have a private practice in Lakewood, a new office we just moved into by Green Mountain. I've been at Mile High as a practitioner for 12 years, and if you really want to stretch, my background before that is as an engineer.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and I have experience actually working with Deanne with the practitioner work, which basically is, I guess you would say, like counseling and praying with people, essentially,
yes.
right?
Yep,
and
that's would be the number one tool is prayer.
Yeah. And it's just really powerful stuff. So I wanted to talk to Deanne about a couple of things, and in preparation, I was looking at her website, and I found a couple quotes that I just really loved. I thought they were very powerful, so I just want to share them with you real quick. So one of the things you say on your website is seeking assistance in the form of counseling is actually a sign of strength, not weakness. And I think that's just so important to know. And I also kind of want to talk a little bit about what you just did this weekend, too, because that kind of ties into this whole thing, too. So I don't know, where do you want to go with that? Do you want to start with what you did this weekend?
Well, it's such a journey, this life is. Such a journey. And there are a lot of beliefs that we have in our culture, in our society, that don't lend us to asking for support, asking for help, or realizing that life is a process, that life is a journey, and that we're continually in a state of growing, learning, expanding, and that the desire to do that is so supported when we help each other out, when we journey together. That and I don't know much about your audience, so I'm thinking in kind of biblical terms of where two or more are gathered, right? But from a science point of view, we could think about synergy. Is each one of us has a lot of ideas, we put our heads together and we brainstorm, and we would come up with more ideas together than either one of us would, separately, or than we both would separately. So that idea of when we're in community, when we're working together, that we create something beyond the sum of the individual parts. And so that's what happens when we ask for help in counseling, and that's what I was participating in a exponential way this past weekend with an organization called Freedom to Choose Project, which came out of my master's in spiritual psychology program. And we had 65, 67 volunteers in a women's prison in California for 2 days, practicing kind of spiritual psychology, but now we're calling it experiential psychology. We're bringing in brain science and emotional intelligence skills that, for the most part, none of us knew when we were growing up, right? We didn't have that model to us, how to work with our emotions. And I was just listening to Brene Brown's talk when she was in Colorado last year, and she said, collectively we probably know like 3 emotions, but we should have a vocabulary of like 30 emotions. So we've got a ways to go.
Definitely.
Collectively, and how do we help each other with that? So in the process with the Freedom to Choose Project, we had 65 volunteers working with 200 incarcerated women, some of them incarcerated for more than 30 years.
Wow.
And 60 of them had worked with us before, so they have some experience with us and our processes. And almost 150 of them brand new to what we're offering. And to, kind of witness their willingness. We were talking about vulnerability, right? The idea of being vulnerable and sharing with each other. because there's also this component of our evolution that's taking place where even someone who hasn't been in a program like Freedom to Choose before has already learned and gained a level of willingness just by being around other people who have.
Okay.
Right? So each time there's a new class, it's kind of like the level of openness and willingness is increased. And the program's been going on for 13 years.
Wow.
Right, so over 13 years, where we're at today with someone who's fresh and new is more open, more willing, more trusting.
Because they know someone who's been through the process already.
And even if they don't intellectually know, they've sort of felt the shift in the culture. They felt a shift in, you could look at probably some statistics and say there's less violence in the prison now. There might even be less drug use, or, there probably are fewer write-ups. There may be some real statistical evidence, and we're going to start looking for that. But what I know from having been there 25 or so times, maybe 50 days I've spent now in California prisons, I see it. I feel it.
You can actually see the difference.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's got to be really powerful. So, and I think that's true not only in the prison system, but everywhere.
Right.
It's anytime one of us heals, I think it has a ripple effect to everyone in our lives.
Absolutely.
And it impacts so many other people other than just the one person who's healing, because it affects the way that we treat other people in our lives and the way that we interact with even strangers and everything.
Right.
And we have more patience and more tolerance and more understanding and forgiveness and less judgment. And so the more that happens, the more the whole world has changed, really.
Absolutely.
Really.
Yeah. And probably a lot of the people that we study or learn from, right, are saying that. And there really is evidence for that. And we don't necessarily even have to do the work in a relationship with someone. If we can just do the work with ourselves, we can change the nature of the relationship. And I demonstrated that for myself in my master's program by doing literally a study, a formal, using all the tools of social science to measure the quality of a relationship, create a way to change the relationship by working with me, and then measuring the relationship again.
Really?
Proved without a shadow of a doubt statistically that the relationship changed. And the entire class of 250 students had that experience. So I'm like, that'd be a really fun study. But I'd rather be sitting in trio with inmates in prison than
doing a study.
than crunching data. But
right.
But it would be fun to see the results of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I guess it's a lot of it is that having the vulnerability to ask for help and admit that we don't know everything, right? I mean, none of us have it all figured out. And I think that sometimes we think we're supposed to, but we really don't. And so it really does take strength to sort of admit that, hey, there's some things I could still learn, right? And you work a lot with that with couples too, don't you?
Yeah, I guess what I was thinking of when you said that is just because we have something that we can learn and grow and be better at, that isn't the same as saying we're wrong because of where we were. Right? We all grew up with a lot of misunderstandings and really a lack of modeling for emotional intelligence and how to work our process, how to have effective communication, right? How to perception check and how to hear each other, right?
Yeah.
So if we haven't had that model, then, we're kind of handicapped in some way, and it doesn't make us wrong that we didn't learn something. It doesn't make us wrong that we misunderstood something. So we kind of get to that place of that openness, willingness. Oh, well, if it was just a misunderstanding that I had in my childhood, I kind of frame that differently. Well, I would like to learn to understand, and I would like to learn to be better at it. Or we're kind of moving from a place of shame to maybe guilt, like I did something wrong, but who I am is not wrong. And that happens in community, right? That happens when we're, like, sometimes we need help with that part. And once we start to have that realization that we can help each other, then it's easier to move beyond it.
Well, and I think something that you were talking about too is not that we didn't necessarily have the skills coming into adulthood, right? And I think that's huge, because I think, at least for me, when I kind of started really doing personal growth work and started moving through stuff, I sort of spent a lot of time beating myself up for what I used to do and the mistakes that I had made before. And I think self-forgiveness is such a huge part of healing, and maybe even the most important part of healing, because we really need to go, it's okay that I didn't know that then.
Right.
I know it now, and now I can do better. I can choose differently now. So,
can I ask you a question about that? How do you do self-forgiveness? Because it's one of my favorite tools.
Oh, that's a good question. I think I'm still working on that, but I think it's I've done some of Louise Hay's mirror work. I think that's really huge, and just kind of telling myself, like, hey, it's okay. The other thing that I've done too that I think was huge, and this is something I love doing with clients, is inner child work. I had a friend I had someone take me through a hypnosis process of sort of reclaiming my inner child and all of that, and I think that's really huge too, because I don't know how to word it, but it's sort of it's almost like going back and reparenting your child in a way that you didn't get, and telling your inner child the stuff you needed to hear. And I think when we can go back and do that heals so much, because there's so much of our stuff that got stuck in us when we were little that we're still carrying the wounds of. Yeah,
that makes sense.
So I don't know if that is it felt like self-forgiveness.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Right.
But
and I like some of the words I've used is I forgive myself for judging myself as wrong, or what happened as wrong. But also I forgive myself for buying into the misunderstandings. Of course we bought into misunderstandings, right? If our families were doing the best they could, and they didn't really have the tools or the science or the experience to explain it, of course they would pass on misunderstandings. And if we didn't know how to kind of confirm our understanding with each other, what I heard you say was that you did some work with that younger part of you, and really understanding what that younger part of you was just needing to be loved through those misunderstandings, and how helpful and how healing that is. But we didn't learn how to do that, so we do kind of have to reparent ourselves, and no one else knows what that younger part of ourselves needs than us, right? That's the part where we're learning how to heal ourselves, support ourselves, and I don't know what that answer is for you, but I could probably support you in finding it.
Yeah.
Because I know that you have that wisdom within you, right? To whoever guided you on that process helped you touch into the misunderstandings and how to support yourself. I just think that stuff is really great.
Yeah. So are those the same kind of tools you use for self-forgiveness?
It would be very similar, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of it really is I forgive myself for the judgments I placed, because I didn't know better.
Yeah.
I forgive myself for judging myself for misunderstanding that, because how could I not have misunderstood it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It was misunderstood by the people who were teaching me, and it came across as truth, and in, maybe some kind of a way it was a form of a truth, because that's what they knew.
Right.
But now we're like, oh, right, and Maya Angelou always said, when we know better, we do better. And if we just sort of know, wow, we all bought into a lot of misunderstandings when we were growing up, even really scientifically based misunderstandings.
Right.
It kind of takes it being personal out of it. It wasn't personal that we misunderstood those things. It was part of the culture.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I think when we understand that, that allows us to forgive other people a lot easier, too.
Right.
Because we realize they
Right.
didn't come in with that set of skills either, right?
They weren't
Nobody
really
did.
trying to set us up.
Yeah. I don't think anybody really makes it to adulthood without some kind of emotional trauma, some kind of like emotional scarring. It's like we don't come into this world just all perfectly loved and perfectly nurtured and get to adulthood just perfectly emotionally healthy, right? We all have stuff to overcome.
Right.
So yeah.
And then I think once we kind of maybe get to where we are and what we've been talking about today is like there's kind of this fun part of it because there's a freedom that comes in that's like, oh, wow, I really feel a lot lighter and freer when I've released the burden and the beliefs that I was carrying around that aren't true about me. It's like, oh, well, I would like to feel even lighter. I suppose there's more.
Right.
Now I get kind of hungry, right? I consider myself a spiritual growth geek because I'm like, let me go look and, I don't necessarily believe in the kind of counseling like, let's go back through your past and dig it all up. But if there's a thread that keeps reoccurring, we might want to look at that. What's the piece that keeps coming up? Is there a pattern that's repeating itself in my life? I want to look at that because I know there's freedom attached to it.
Right.
And I know it feels good. And my body's healthier and stronger. Right? I've experienced that so much and I've seen it in others so much that I'm like, oh yeah. Now I am willing to seek out the support and the help. And I love that you do kind of the mind, body, spirit, emotional piece all together because those all fit. Those all tie together, right? The emotional, was it Candace Pert who did decided the emotional body, subconscious mind is our body, right? And the emotions get stuck in our body and we can feel that. We can use that information as a clue to what the belief is that we've gotten stuck in. And then when we learn how to feel that subtle energy in our bodies, then we can also feel how good it is when it's released.
Definitely.
It's like, oh yeah, I want more of that.
And that's the thing. That's my belief is that through that is freedom, right? Getting rid of all that stuff is really freedom. And there is strength in that vulnerability, and I mean that's maybe kind of a separate thought, but
well, the willingness to do it is a willingness to be vulnerable for sure.
Yeah.
And yet that's right. It feels like it's creating space. If we pause and we breathe and we're like kind of willing and create that vulnerability, it creates a space. Right? And that space is, that was Viktor Frankl's work. In that space is the space for freedom. It's a space to make a different choice. And it's a space to allow the kind of the fight, flight, freeze response that locks us up and keeps us from thinking, creates a space to consider something different. And that is kind of a freedom, for sure. Just in that moment.
Yeah, it's not going into that automatic protective response, right? And really being able to choose something different. So, yeah. Yeah, I remember years ago, many years ago, I went through a really tough time in my life and was dealing with some relationship stuff. And I remember telling one of my best friends at the time, I told her, I'm not gonna love anymore. I'm not gonna let anybody get close to me. I'm just gonna put up walls and I'm gonna be hard as nails and I'm gonna be tough and nobody's ever gonna get in again. And she stopped me right there and she said, no, you're so wrong. She said, true strength is allowing yourself to be vulnerable. She said, when you put up walls to protect yourself, it's because you're scared and you're weak. Right. And true strength is really about being willing to be vulnerable and being willing to be hurt because of what you could experience, right? And that just being able to live in a way that you're authentic and actually feeling emotions and you're not this cold robot who's, living behind walls all the time, I guess. So
yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's so counterintuitive to how we grew up.
It is.
Right? And really our culture in so many ways, unless we have, I mean, I guess like you and I share a really strong spiritual community, and we have a lot of people in our lives that live that way. But if we go out in the world, there's a lot more information about, no, you need to protect yourself, you need to create boundaries, you need to feel safe, and that, right, build walls. We need to keep safe. It's not a natural instinct to say, oh, let me just let my guard down and open my heart and let you in. But every time I'm in an environment where I have a chance to do that and be in that supportive place, it's so amazing, right? Like I'm losing words in being able to describe it. I can't articulate what that is like.
Well, some things I think there are no words for, right? It's like trying to describe the taste of chocolate to someone who's never tasted chocolate. It's like you can't really do it. It's something that's really experiential, and you have to just have that experience.
Yeah.
So something else I wanted to mention too is the other quote on her website that I just loved was, it's my intention in working with you is to support the discovery and clarity of your own inner wisdom, to cultivate your own inner guidance system, and to find and speak your own authentic voice. Nothing is truer than what's true for you. And I love that, because I think our culture sort of teaches that too, that the answer is out there, someone else has the answer, and there's a lot of wonderful gurus and experts out there, and they all have wisdom to share, and I think it's good to tap into that. But really, at the end of the day, it's really about checking in with ourselves and finding what's true for us and letting that be our guide.
I'm having a new thought about that since we talked. It's like thinking of how really we resonate with that inner wisdom, and maybe there is a part of us that always knows, hey, I know what's best for me. And maybe that's what keeps us from seeking out a counselor or that kind of advice, is maybe there's also a belief of that's saying someone else knows what's better for me than I do. And, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some various misunderstandings mixed up in that, because on one hand, we don't always know that we know for ourselves what's best, but I bet there's a deep place residing within all of us that does. That says, really, I'm the one who knows best. And maybe we've tried it out before. It's so common for us to try and advise each other. And sometimes it can come out in a way that might sound like, I know what's best for you.
Right.
As opposed to, oh, have you considered this, or have you tried that, or really even just asking, well, what do you think? Right? What do you think you should do? And as a counselor, I'm sure you've been caught up in this trap before, as somebody says, no, Rachel, just tell me what to do. I'll just do what you say, right?
Yes,
Just tell me what to do.
Just give me the answer.
Or like, oh no, that's a trap. That's a trap. Part of me wants to buy into it. I do sort of want to tell you. And I try to have the centeredness to be able to say, okay, well, if I do tell you what I would do, it's going to be with a lot of caveats, because I'm not sure that what I would do is the right thing for you.
Right.
Or, I'm open to helping you consider a whole range of ideas and let you pick what you think is your best or what resonates with you, right?
Yeah.
If I throw out a new idea and you're like, ooh, there it is.
Right.
I didn't know what that was.
And I think that's what counseling or therapy can do is sort of really give us a different perspective, help us look at things in a different way, maybe present different options, and then we still have the option to figure out what's right for us, right?
So I might try to give you an example.
Okay.
It's a pretty tender one. So when I was in the prison Sunday, just 2 days ago, we were doing some trios on giving and receiving feedback, and one of the women in my trio had received some very painful feedback from the people in her community. And it was kind of along the lines of "you're ugly."
Oh, wow.
So, right, really painful to hear, really painful. And we were going through several steps around this. And at one point, we were trying to separate the emotion from the information. And I was actually in an observer position. I wasn't facilitating the process. I was just observing. But sometimes as a experienced volunteer, it's okay for me to do a little coaching from the observer chair. But I was thinking ahead, like, what's the information that she's getting in the message, "You're ugly"? I'm like, and I was really racking my brain, and I was trying to drop into my heart, and I also knew I wasn't facilitating it, so I wasn't responsible to help her find it. And my job is to hold a loving space for the sharer and the facilitator to find the information. But I also wanted to really be open, and all of a sudden it felt like it just dropped into my heart. And so when it got to the point and the facilitator was kind of looking at me, like, partially because I was kind of, had some energy around it, and I said, "No, you're facilitating, you take it." And she said, "Oh no, we're tag teaming this," because she recognized how hard this was. I think we've all probably at one time in our lives felt that kind of painful feedback from somebody, and what good is it? But I shared with the person, I said, "I'm just going to offer this for your consideration. What if the message, the information is really that you might not be fully loving yourself as much as God loves you?"
Wow.
And she could hear that. She had already told me about her relationship with God. And that felt like the most precious possible realization of, what if I'm not loving myself as much? Like, that's information we could hear. Right? I'm not loving myself as much as God loves me. I could love myself more. God loves me
So
more.
I have to just ask you this. How did you get to that from the "you're ugly" kind of feedback?
It just came in.
Okay.
Like, all of a sudden, I just knew it.
Wow. That's powerful stuff, though. Definitely.
Isn't it? Like,
yeah.
I mean, all of our eyes started leaking in that moment, right?
It just clicked with everyone.
It just clicked. And she ended up standing up in the large group and sharing. And the way she shared it was appreciating the two of us who helped her get there. But of course, the facilitators turned it back on her and said, "Can you take that in about yourself?" And she said, "Today I can.
Wow.
Today I can take it in." Because right when she heard that and she received that, she was the most beautiful person I've ever seen. Because she could be open and vulnerable to receive a fuller experience of her own loving and God's loving and our loving, right? There was so much loving in that moment, in that experience.
That sounds like a really pivotal healing moment for her. And
For
for everyone,
all
really,
of
for
us.
everyone who is there, not just her.
And then that,
Wow.
right, the vibration of that starts filling the room. And all of a sudden we're in this huge gymnasium that's just overflowing with loving.
Yeah. This is kind of off topic, but I just have to say that's one of the things that I really love about group work and like classes and seminars and that kind of thing where we're doing this kind of work is when one person has a shift, I think everybody in the room feels it. I mean, it kind of is this almost palpable energy change that when that person heals, it heals something in all of us. It's not just that person's healing, it heals something in all of us.
Right. Well, and you're really coming back full circle to how you were starting, is like, when we're willing to do our work, right? We're not just doing it for ourselves, right? We're doing it for our relationships. We're doing it for our children, our families, our community, our planet, right? Our planet is healing. And it's actually a vision I had when I first went to the prison, and I was flying over it on my way home, and I pictured, 65 volunteers going into one of what I considered the most concentrated points of pain on our planet. Right? 3,000 incarcerated women, maximum security. This is a painful place. But taking in the loving, and then I could just see the loving leaving, right? Through phone calls, through letters, through visits, through being released. And now many women are being released back into the community. And they come back to us, and they meet with us, and they share with us what an impact it had. In some respects, the bottom line was to just simply be loved. So I would say, we talked about like my skills, my tools, my background, my training, but ultimately the power of prayer is my biggest tool, and maybe even bigger is just simply being loving, just being in a place of loving and holding that space.
Because that's really the energy that heals everything, right?
That's the energy that heals everything.
Yeah.
Right, and they come in many forms or many conversations, but that's the key.
Yeah, there's this great book, and the name of it is not coming to me in this moment. I think it's called Healers on Healing, and it's all about these different styles of healing, and it kind of all comes down to the underlying theme of everything is that what really heals is the love. That it doesn't necessarily matter the technique or tool, whether it's hypnosis or EFT or spiritual counseling or whatever it is. At the base of it, it's love, right? I mean, that's why therapy animals are so huge, because dogs are just like pure love. They're just these little balls of love, right?
If you're holding a fuzzy little puppy, your heart's going to open.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in that open heart, right, in that spaciousness of an open heart, things transform.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard to articulate that, but I absolutely believe it, right? And it doesn't even matter what modality anymore. What I love the recognition of things we've done, right? Certificates and all the learning that we've done. And it just gives us more ways in which perhaps to express the love.
Yeah.
Because it's a little hard to say, well, just come talk to me and I'll love you. Right.
Yeah, that's true. And yet I think that's kind of what everybody needs. I remember going through a point in my life where I was just almost terrified, and I still sometimes get that way a little bit, where if someone that I love is going through a grief experience, sometimes this thing comes up of, I don't know the right words to say. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make this better. And I think it kind of comes down to, we can't fix it. We can't necessarily make it better from an outside standpoint. It's not something that we can fix, but just loving that person. And sometimes all somebody needs is to, and I'm getting emotional just talking about it, but sometimes all they need is just to have you throw your arms around them and just say, I love you and I'm here for you.
I'm just going to be here with you.
I'm just going to sit here and cry with you. Right? Or
what
whatever.
What a gift that is.
Yeah.
Because if we're willing to do that, then we're removing the judgment that how they feel is wrong.
Right.
That how someone who's grieved, right, and like there should be some time limit on it. Oh, I'm sorry, have you been grieving for 6? Yeah, no.
Right.
That's another opportunity that we have as a culture to shift. The part of us that feels the pain and doesn't want to be comfortable in the pain wants to get it over with. But the fact is, that's just a clue about how much we loved, and we get to just be with each other. That's what'll help transform it so much more, is to just accompany one another in the pain and the grief, and not making it wrong that it's there.
Absolutely.
Soothes it.
Yeah. Wow.
Good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So, I don't know, is there anything else you wanted to discuss?
It feels like we could keep talking for hours or
It
days.
does. Yeah, it does.
and yet we covered a lot. It feels really rich.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't you tell everybody a little bit about how, if they would like to work with you, how you work with people and how they can contact you and the different stuff that you offer, because I know you've got kind of a range of things that you offer.
Yeah. One of my missions is about creating healthy relationships on the planet. And really it's a relationship with each other, a relationship in community, a relationship with ourselves, relationship with our higher power. They all kind of mix together in so many ways. So I do a couples workshop called Hold Me Tight, which is a curriculum from Sue Johnson, who created emotionally focused therapy for couples, very research-based, but absolutely makes sense, makes heart sense, makes emotional sense, process. And I do provide emotionally focused therapy for couples or relationships. And sometimes that's a one-time session of, hey, we're stuck, help us move out of it. Or it's a longer process about the patterns that we get stuck in. And just individual work, whether it's kind of spiritual counseling or maybe more of a coaching or a spiritual coaching kind of perspective. I am in Lakewood. I prefer sessions in person because that heart connection just feels so much more present for me in person. I've had also great success, doing phone or kind of Zoom, Skype type sessions. But I guess the easiest way to get a hold of me is, do you want me to give my phone number or my website? Yeah,
absolutely.
So Deanne.
And we'll put them in the notes too, but
okay. So DeanneDrda.com, DeanneDrda.com. Links to my website, and my phone is 303-472-1580.
Awesome. Thank you, Deanne, for being here.
Thank you.
So appreciate it. It was so good to connect with you again, and I loved working with you, and I just love knowing you, because that everything you said, everything that she talked about, that's Deanne. That's how she lives her life. She just walks around just being this kind of emissary of love. I feel like you just kind of spread love and light everywhere you go, and I love that. So, and I felt like right from the beginning we connected on a heart level. I felt like you saw me and you got me right from day one. So thank you.
There's kind of two pieces to that. Is that you spot it, you got it. You can't see that and recognize that in me if it's not also true about you.
Well, thank you.
and then we were talking this weekend about Avatars, the movie, right? I see you, right? That powerful, I see you. And then the other part of it is it's good to be seen.
It is, yeah.
Right? To see each other and to be seen feels really good, and that encourages us to keep doing the work that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for being you.
Well, thank you. My pleasure. So something I wanted to just bring up too really quickly, and we kind of talked about it, but I just want to make sure that people get that therapy and counseling, whatever form that takes, it's not just for people who have a problem, right? It's really, we can all make our lives better and richer and more full no matter what level we're at. So I think it's beneficial for everyone.
Well,
right?
And actually, if we're going to be doing this work for others, we should have our own practitioner, our own therapist.
Absolutely.
We should be doing our own body work. We should be, right?
Yeah.
We need to stay tuned up, and we need to keep the energy moving. And I think that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep supporting each other.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.